Whenever a Pakistani thinks about China, you're supposed to go all warm and fuzzy. Because, well, China is Pakistan's best friend after all, right? Well, we wouldn't get all warm and fuzzy just yet. Pakistan has signed two free trade agreements with China to date. While the first one was nothing short of a disaster for Pakistan, the government and businessmen are of high hopes that the second time around might just be the charm. But the big question hanging like a sword on this trade agreement is, do we really need a trade agreement with China? And if so, how do we plan on making it work this time around? Pakistan's first free trade agreement, FTA, with China was a bit of a dud. Signed back in 2006 with much fanfare and beginning operations in 2007, the phase 1 of the FTA did little to improve Pakistani exports to China and only worsened our trade deficit with our neighbor. In fact, it favored China more than it favored Pakistan. So Pakistan went back to the drawing board with somewhere between 11 reported meetings of negotiations over 7 years with the Chinese. And over a decade later, the result is phase 2 of China-Pakistan Free Trade Agreement, which was finalized in 2019 and implemented on January 1st, 2020, and is set to last until 2024. But everyone is not happy. Just this week, there were grumbles from the Federation of Pakistan Chambers of Commerce and Industry, FPCCI, on whether Pakistan could fully take advantage of the FTA, considering how useless and poor Pakistani exports are. And the FPCCI suggests that instead of signing an FTA, the government should urgently develop a robust and holistic industrial policy that will lead to massive industrialization. Well, considering that the last time Pakistan had any semblance of a formal industrialization policy was around 60 years ago, in retrospect, the FPCCI's plea is just a little too late. But it is a valid point to raise. What is even the point of an FTA with China? Now, a bit of the background. Pakistan's global exports have never been the healthiest. According to the Economic Complexity Index, Pakistan ranks 94th in terms of complexity of products it exports. Similarly, on the Global Competitive Index, Pakistan ranks 107th out of 140 countries. And despite Pakistan's global exports increasing by 47% between 2005 and 2018, imports have gone up by 140% in the same period, outweighing exports massively. On top of these great global figures, Pakistan's trade with China has always been asymmetric. Consider this, only 7% of Pakistani exports went to China, whereas most went to Europe and the United States. On the flip side though, China took up 28.5% of Pakistan's imports, by far the largest trading partner. The original FTA was meant to address and also foresee these sorts of problems, and the first phase spanned between 2007 and 2012 and involved the elimination of tariffs on some 7,500 tariff lines. Now, according to a report, China-Pakistan Free Trade Agreement Phase 2, a preliminary analysis written by LUMS economist Nazish Afraz and Nadia Mukhtar and commissioned by the Pakistani Business Council PBC and the Consortium for Development Policy Research, bilateral trade has flourished, growing by 242% between 2007 and 2018, nearly 6 times faster than the growth of Pakistan's trade with the rest of the world in the same period. Total trade with China since the signing of the original FTA also shot up 16.4 billion US dollars in 2018. So then what is the problem? The problem is that this FTA benefited China significantly more than it did Pakistan. Between 2014 and 2018, Pakistani exports to China declined 7% annually, while imports from China rose 12% annually. Another way of looking at it, Pakistan's trade deficit with China represented 25% of Pakistan's total trade deficit in 2007. By 2018, this had shot up to 38% or around 13 billion US dollars. This is simply because China offered little to no concessions on what are actually Pakistan's top exports. A typical example of Chinese exploitation. On top of that, in 2010, China signed the ASEAN China FTA, also known as ACFTA. Pakistan's competitive advantage was practically destroyed as China offered infinitely better tariffs to ASEAN members and also to one of Pakistan's biggest competitors, Bangladesh. In fact, the ACFTA has been estimated to have led to a whopping loss of 80% of Pakistani exports volume to China. So what now? Now, the phase 2 of the FTA, or to be called the FTA 2, has been negotiated with these problems in mind. According to the report's preliminary analysis, the outlook is somewhat hopeful and the tariff structure has definitely improved. Along the 8,238 product lines that FTA 2 affects, Pakistan is now offered lower tariffs on 46% of the products under FTA 2 as compared to FTA 1. About 45% of the tariff lines, or 3,707 items, have been offered duty-free access. A further 30% of tariff lines will have duty-free access by 2030. Additionally, 75% of all products will have zero tariff applied by the FTAs last year, and 93% of product lines will face a tariff of 10% or less. Only 9 out of the 8,238 face a tariff of 30% or more. Other improvements in FTA 2 include standard safeguard clauses, which are a feature of FTAs around the world, and one is left to wonder why they were not included before. Along with this, real-time electronic exchange of data to curtail misreporting is also included. What makes this report interesting and relevant is that it not only shows the difference between the tariffs of FTA 1 and FTA 2, but also shows how FTA 2 could affect 3 categories of products. These are Priority 1 products, are products that Pakistan exports to China 5% of the tariff lines. Priority 2 products are products that Pakistan exports and China imports, but Pakistan does not yet export to China, 17% of tariff lines. And Priority 3 products are products that China imports but Pakistan does not export at all, 65% of the tariff lines. But now, even though the government has ironed out tariffs, it needs to adopt common sense and bridge serious gaps like setting up a commercial consulate in China, improve inspection of Pakistani goods, and just keeping an eye out for what China is up to. However, despite all this, there is a lot that Pakistan needs to do if it plans to benefit from the new FTA. Read Profit's detailed report regarding the new FTA with China, and do let us know in the comments below what topics you would like us to cover next. And do not forget to like and subscribe to Profit.